I was 53 years old when I realized that my family had turned into a business. Not a real business, something darker, something where I was just an asset to be used, manipulated, and discarded if I didn't comply. My brother-in-law, Marcus, had been building this empire of silence for years. He was involved in something. I never knew exactly what. Real estate deals that seemed off, investments that came out of nowhere, money that moved through accounts too quickly. But my sister, Jennifer, she was too focused on maintaining the image, the big house, the charity galas, the Instagram life. I had always been the quiet one in the family, the one who kept to himself. After my wife passed away 8 years ago, I became even more isolated. I threw myself into work, into being a good uncle, into staying out of trouble. I was a civil engineer, respected in my field, someone people could trust. That reputation was everything to me. Then about 2 years ago, things started changing. It began with small requests. Marcus would call me, "Hey, we need your name on some documents for a property development." Nothing serious, just bureaucratic stuff. I trusted him then. I signed. Later, Jennifer would ask if I could speak to someone, a colleague, a business partner, and vouch for their character. I did it, thinking I was helping family, but the requests became more specific, more demanding. "Tell the city inspector that the development meets all safety codes. I'll send you the details." But when he sent me the details, I could see immediately that they didn't. The structural reports had been altered. The environmental assessments were incomplete. Everything was fabricated. I confronted Marcus about it. I remember sitting across from him at a coffee shop near his office downtown. He was calm, too calm. He stirred his coffee slowly, and when he looked at me, there was something cold in his eyes that I had never seen before. "You're going to do this," he said quietly, "and you're not going to ask questions." "I can't do that," I told him. "It's illegal. It's unethical. I built my reputation on integrity." He leaned back in his chair and smiled. That smile made my stomach drop. "You know about Michelle, right? Your assistant from 3 years ago?" I felt something freeze inside me. Michelle had been a young intern at my firm, smart, talented. One day, she just disappeared from the office. Everyone said she had quit suddenly, moved away. "What about Michelle?" I asked, but I already felt sick. "Well," Marcus continued, still smiling, "there are some things in your personal files, some emails, some conversations, things that, if they surfaced, would make people think you were inappropriate with her. We both know that's not true, but people don't need facts, they need a story." I couldn't speak, my hands were shaking. "Jennifer doesn't know about this yet," he said, "and she doesn't need to. Your niece doesn't need to know what kind of man her uncle really is, or what people might think he is. Neither does the licensing board, neither does anyone else. All you have to do is sign some documents, make a few phone calls, do what I ask." That was the moment my life became a prison. Over the next 18 months, I became Marcus's tool. He would call with requests, always phrased as favors, always wrapped in threats. When city inspectors would come, I would go and tell them everything was in order, even when I knew it wasn't. I would use my professional credentials to validate fraudulent safety reports. I would call business partners and tell them that developments were legitimate when I knew they were part of money laundering schemes. The worst part was the shame. Every night, I would sit in my apartment and hate myself. I would pour whiskey and think about how far I had fallen. I had spent my entire career building something meaningful. I had mentored young engineers. I had written papers on sustainable development. I had integrity. Now I had nothing but fear. Jennifer noticed something was wrong. We had always been close, even though I had distanced myself after my wife died. One afternoon, she came to my apartment unannounced. She looked tired, older than she should have. "You're different," she said, sitting on my couch. "You barely come to family dinners anymore. You don't talk to anyone. Is it about losing David?" That was my wife's name, David Chen. We had been together for 27 years. I almost told her everything right then. My hands were shaking, my voice was caught in my throat. But then I thought about what Marcus had said, about the emails, about Michelle, about my reputation. I thought about my niece, Sophie, who had just started college. I thought about how this would destroy Jennifer too. "I'm fine," I lied, "just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was dying inside. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in March. Marcus called me at 8:15 at night. His voice was different, panicked, almost frantic. "The city is opening an investigation," he said. "They found inconsistencies in the reports on the Riverside development. You need to meet with the inspector tomorrow and tell him everything was verified correctly. You need to be absolutely convincing." "Marcus, I can't," I said. "This is too far. They're going to find out eventually. When they do, you're the one who signed off," he interrupted. "You're the professional. You're the one with the reputation. You're the one who will go to prison. Not me, never me. I have nothing. You have everything to lose." He was right. He'd protected himself perfectly. I was the visible one. I was the one whose name was on everything. "Tomorrow," he said, 9 a.m., Conference Room B at City Hall. You're going to walk in there and tell that inspector that every single report is authentic. You're going to convince him there's nothing to worry about, or Michelle's story is going to be everywhere by Friday." He hung up. I sat in the dark of my apartment for hours. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't move. And somewhere around midnight, I made a decision. I was going to fight back. The next morning, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I called my lawyer. Robert had been my lawyer for 15 years. We met at law school. I had gone for 2 years before I realized I wanted to be an engineer instead. He had always respected my integrity, always told me I was one of the most honest people he knew. "I need you to understand something," I told him in his office, before I said anything else. "If you take this case, it will be complicated. It might hurt my reputation, but I need you to know from the beginning, I'm innocent of what my brother-in-law is claiming. Everything he's done, he did to force me into compliance. But my name is going to be on documents, a lot of documents." Robert listened to everything. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "We need to record your brother-in-law," he said finally. "We need him on tape, confessing, threatening you. That's our only protection." "How do I do that?" I asked. "You call him. You arrange a meeting. You wear a wire." My heart was pounding. "Isn't that illegal?" "Not in this state," Robert said. "One-party consent. You can record any conversation you're part of without the other person's knowledge. It's legal here. We'll get everything we need." That afternoon, I called Marcus. "I need to talk to you," I said. "Before I meet with the inspector, I need to understand exactly what's happening. I need to know that you're going to protect me after this is done." Marcus was suspicious. I could hear it in his voice. But he was also confident. He had always been confident. He thought he had me trapped. "Fine," he said. "My office, 6 o'clock. Robert fitted me with a microphone that afternoon. It was small, hidden in the fabric of my shirt. I could see the wire running down my chest. I looked like a fool, but I felt like a soldier preparing for battle. When I walked into Marcus's office building that evening, my hands were cold and my mind was crystal clear. I had spent 18 months being afraid. I was done being afraid. Marcus was sitting at his desk when I walked in. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. There were windows behind him that looked out over the city. Everything about his office was designed to make you feel small. "So," he said, not bothering to stand up, "you wanted to talk before tomorrow's meeting." I sat down across from him and I made sure my shirt was positioned so the microphone would pick up everything clearly. "I want to know what happens after," I said. "After I speak to the inspector. After the investigation is closed, what do I get out of this? You've been threatening me for 18 months, Marcus. You've destroyed my peace. You've made me complicit in something I never wanted to be part of." Marcus laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "You get to keep your reputation," he said. "You get to stay out of prison. You get to live your life without everyone knowing the truth about you and that girl." "There is no truth about me and Michelle," I said, and I made sure my voice was steady. "You fabricated it." "I know," he said, smiling. "But does anyone else? Does the licensing board? Does your professional organization? Once I release those emails, the ones I altered, the ones I created, your career is over, your reputation is destroyed, and you'd still be an accessory to fraud." I looked at him across that desk, and something inside me broke. Not in a bad way. It was like a lock breaking open. "You've been threatening me this whole time," I said, "with lies." "Lies that people will believe," he said. "That's all that matters." I leaned forward. "Did you know that I've been documenting everything?" I asked quietly. "Every request, every threat, every conversation. And did you know that I'm recording this conversation right now?" His face changed. It was like watching a light go out. "What?" he said. "You're confessing," I said. "You're confessing to blackmail, to extortion, to threatening me with fabricated evidence, to fraud, to money laundering. It's all being recorded right now. Everything you just said." Marcus stood up from his desk so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "You can't," he started. "I can," I said. "And I have. And my lawyer has copies. And the police have been informed." He came around the desk toward me, his face dark with rage. But before he could reach me, the door opened. 2 police officers were standing there. They had been waiting outside the whole time. "Marcus Reynolds," one of them said. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of extortion, blackmail, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." I watched them cuff him. I watched them read him his rights. I watched him look at me with an expression that was no longer confident. It was terrified, and I felt nothing but relief. But here's the thing. I knew it wasn't over yet. The investigation was going to expand. They were going to find more, and my name was still going to be connected to all of it. I still had to face the consequences of what I had been forced to do, even if I was forced to do it. The next morning I called Jennifer. I told her everything. I told her about the blackmail. I told her about the recording. I told her about Marcus's arrest. She cried, she apologized. She said she had no idea that Marcus had hidden everything from her. And I believed her. But then came the real test. Came the meeting with the federal investigators. Came the weeks of interviews and depositions and legal battles. Came the moment when I had to stand up in court and admit that I had signed off on fraudulent reports, that I had used my professional credentials to validate fake documents, that I had broken my own code of ethics. The courtroom was packed, my professional organization was represented, the city was represented, the federal prosecutors were there, and sitting in the back, trying to be invisible, was Jennifer. The judge looked at me sternly. "Mr. Chen," the judge said, "you are a licensed professional engineer. You have violated every principle of your profession. You have put public safety at risk. How do you explain this?" And I told the truth. I told them everything. I told them about the 18 months of threats. I told them about the fabricated evidence Marcus had created. I told them about the recording. The federal prosecutors played the recording for the entire courtroom. Marcus's voice filled the silence. Every threat, every word of extortion, every detail of his scheme. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter seemed to be holding her breath. When it was over, the judge looked at me again. But this time, his expression had changed. "While you made serious professional errors," he said, "the circumstances under which you were coerced significantly mitigate your culpability. The evidence of extortion is clear. Your cooperation with the investigation has been invaluable. And then he dismissed the charges against me. Marcus got 7 years. 7 years in federal prison for extortion, blackmail, fraud, and conspiracy. Jennifer lost everything, the house, the money, all of it. It was seized as part of the investigation into the laundering scheme. But I got my life back. It took months for my professional organization to fully reinstate my license. It took longer for me to believe that I deserved to keep it. But slowly I started to rebuild. I started to mentor young engineers again. I started to feel like myself. And I learned something that I wish I had known 18 months earlier. Fear is a chain that only works if you believe you can't break it. The months that followed were a strange mix of relief and reconstruction. On one hand, I was free from Marcus's grip. The charges against me had been dismissed. My name had been cleared in the public record, but on the other hand, the world had shifted beneath me in ways I was still trying to understand. My professional reputation wasn't destroyed, but it was bruised. People knew my name had been connected to the fraud. They knew I had signed documents that were fraudulent. Even though the court had explained the coercion, some colleagues kept their distance. Some clients cancelled their contracts with my firm. The whispers followed me into conference rooms and coffee shops. I learned to live with it. What I couldn't live with was the silence in my family. Jennifer had shut down completely after everything came out. She moved into a small apartment across town with Sophie. She wouldn't return my calls for weeks. When she finally did, her voice was hollow. "I don't know how to process this," she told me. "I was married to him for 23 years. I thought I knew him." "You didn't know," I said gently. "Neither did I. He hid it from everyone." "But you knew," she said, and there was something sharp in her voice. "You knew and you didn't tell me. You let me believe." "He was threatening me," I said. "If I had told you, he would have destroyed you too. He would have used you as leverage." There was a long silence on the line. "I know," she finally said. "I know that rationally, but I'm still angry. I'm angry at him. I'm angry at you. I'm angry at myself for not seeing what was happening right in front of me." "That anger is fair," I told her. "Take the time you need." But it hurt. It hurt more than I expected it to hurt. The federal investigation expanded over the following months. They started looking at all of Marcus's deals, all of his investments, all of the shell companies and fake fronts. What they found was staggering. Marcus had been running a sophisticated money laundering operation for nearly a decade. He had moved millions through real estate developments, art purchases, and cryptocurrency exchanges. The money came from sources they were still investigating, organized crime probably, though they wouldn't confirm it officially. The prosecutors called me back in for more interviews. They asked me detailed questions about every transaction, every conversation, every request Marcus had made. I told them everything I knew. I cooperated fully. They told me that my cooperation would likely result in leniency when it came time for sentencing, but they also told me something else. "We found something," one of the prosecutors said during a meeting in late May. "We found a second set of files on Marcus's computer, personal files, encrypted. We finally broke through, and we found emails between Marcus and someone else, someone who was feeding him information about city inspections before they happened, someone who was helping him avoid detection." I knew where this was going. "Who?" I asked. The prosecutor looked at me carefully. "Your niece." My stomach dropped. "Sophie?" I said. "That's not possible. She was 19, the prosecutor said. "She's 20 now. According to the emails, she's been helping her father for about 3 years. She was feeding him information she was getting from her internship at the city planning department." I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't think. Sophie was Jennifer's daughter. She was brilliant. She'd gotten into Stanford, but she chose to stay close to home and study at the state university instead. She had gotten an internship at city planning because she wanted to work in urban development. She had been so excited about it, and all that time she had been working for her father, for Marcus. "What's going to happen to her?" I asked. "That depends," the prosecutor said. "She's cooperating. She's telling us everything. She didn't fully understand what her father was doing. She thought she was just helping a family business. Once she realized it was fraud, she wanted to cooperate. We're recommending leniency, but there may still be charges." I left that meeting in a daze. I drove directly to Jennifer's apartment. She opened the door and took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "It's Sophie," she said immediately. "What happened to Sophie?" I told her everything. I watched her face crumble. I watched her sink onto her couch like all the strength had gone out of her body. "She was just trying to help her father," Jennifer whispered. "She didn't understand what she was doing. She's not a bad person. She's just—" "I know," I said. "She made a mistake, but she's cooperating now." "She's going to have a criminal record," Jennifer said. "Her entire future is compromised because of him, because of what he did." I sat down next to her, and we sat in silence for a long time. Sophie ended up taking a plea deal. She faced charges of fraud and conspiracy, but because she cooperated fully with the investigation and because she was young and had been manipulated by her father, she received probation and community service instead of jail time. Her internship was terminated and her record was marked, but she survived it. What she didn't survive intact was her relationship with both of us. Jennifer blamed herself for not knowing what Sophie was doing. Sophie blamed her mother for not protecting her from her father, and both of them, in different ways, blamed me for not stopping it earlier. "If you had told us what was happening," Sophie said to me during one of the mandatory family counseling sessions, "if you had come to Mom when he first started threatening you, maybe Dad wouldn't have involved me. Maybe I wouldn't be dealing with this. He threatened me with something that would have destroyed my career," I said quietly. "If I had come to your mother, he would have done the same thing to her. He would have found a way to involve you regardless. He was always going to use whoever he could use." "But you were the only one who saw it clearly," Sophie said, and there were tears in her eyes. "You were the only one who could have stopped it." And that was the thing that haunted me the most, because part of me believed her. 3 months after Sophie's sentencing, I sat in my apartment on a Thursday evening, and I made a decision. I was going to take a leave of absence from my firm. I was going to step back from my career for a while, not because I had to, my license was intact, but because I needed to figure out who I was after everything that had happened. I had spent 18 months being controlled by Marcus's fear. I had spent the following months trying to rebuild my reputation, and I was exhausted. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. I needed space to think. I called my senior partner and told him I was taking a 6-month leave. He tried to talk me out of it, but I was firm. He finally agreed. I spent that first month doing nothing. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't see anyone. I sat in my apartment and I thought about David. I thought about how much I had changed since he died. I thought about how grief had made me vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation. I thought about how I had spent so many years trying to be strong that I had forgotten how to ask for help. One afternoon in July, Jennifer called me. "I got a job," she said. "Nothing fancy. I'm working as an office manager at a law firm, but it's something. It's a way forward." "That's good," I said. "That's really good, Jennifer." "Sophie's talking about maybe trying to go back to school," she continued. "She wants to study something else. Something that has nothing to do with city planning or real estate. She's thinking about environmental science." "That sounds perfect for her," I said. "I owe you an apology," Jennifer said suddenly, "for being angry at you, for blaming you. You were the victim here as much as any of us were, and you're the one who had the courage to stop it." "I was terrified," I said. "I wasn't courageous. I was desperate." "Desperate and courageous," Jennifer said. "They're not mutually exclusive." After we hung up, I realized something. For the first time since David died, I felt like I could breathe normally. The weight that had been pressing down on my chest for so long was finally lifting. I wasn't going to pretend that everything was perfect. Marcus's shadow would follow me for a long time. The investigation had exposed things about the corruption in city planning that were still unfolding. There were more arrests coming. There were more trials. But I had stopped being a puppet. I had stopped being controlled by fear. And that was everything. When I returned to work after my leave of absence, things were different. Not dramatically different, but different in the small ways that matter. Colleagues looked at me differently, some with respect, some with caution, but nobody looked away anymore. I had become, in a strange way, part of the story of the city's reckoning with corruption. The newspapers had written about my case during the trials. They had portrayed me as a whistleblower, even though that wasn't quite accurate, but the narrative had taken on a life of its own, and I had learned to live with it. My first major project back was a new community center in one of the city's underserved neighborhoods. It was a chance to build something that was genuinely good, something that would help people. I threw myself into the work. I designed buildings that were sustainable, accessible, and beautiful. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing work that actually meant something, beyond just paying the bills. It was during this project that something unexpected happened. I received a letter from a woman named Sarah Mitchell. She was a civil rights attorney working on behalf of people who had been harmed by corruption in the city's development approval process. She wanted to know if I would be willing to consult on a class action lawsuit against the city for approving fraudulent developments that had put people at risk. I thought about it for a week. Part of me wanted to be done with all of it. Part of me wanted to move forward and never look back. But then I thought about the people who had lived in buildings that were structurally unsound because the safety inspections had been falsified. I thought about the families who had been hurt by this corruption, and I realized that my obligation didn't end with my own case. I called Sarah and told her I would help. Over the next 2 years, I worked with her office on the lawsuit. I testified about the process of inspections, about the documents I had falsified, about how the system had been corrupted. I explained how developers like Marcus had manipulated the system through connections and threats. And I helped identify patterns that showed this wasn't an isolated incident. It was systemic. The lawsuit was ultimately successful. The city agreed to a settlement that would go toward remediation for affected residents and toward strengthening the inspection process to prevent future corruption. When the settlement was announced at a press conference, Sarah found me in the crowd afterward. "Thank you," she said simply. "What you did, it matters." "It took me a long time to get here," I said, "to understand that I had a responsibility to do this. That's how it usually works," she said. "Most people don't find their courage until they absolutely have to." Around the same time, something else happened that I didn't expect. The professional organization that governs engineers published an article in their monthly journal about ethics and coercion. They used my case as a teaching moment, about how even good people can be forced to compromise their values, about how important it is to have support systems in place, about how the profession needs to protect its members from exactly this kind of manipulation. They didn't use my name, but everyone in my field knew who they were talking about, and instead of shame, I felt something like vindication. I had made mistakes, but those mistakes had led to something important. 9 months into my community center project, I ran into Sophie at the grocery store. She was with a friend, and I almost walked past without saying anything, but she saw me and her face lit up. "Uncle David," she said, and she came and hugged me. "I haven't seen you in forever." "How are you?" I asked. "How's school?" "It's good," she said. "Really good, actually. I'm doing environmental science like I planned." And I'm doing volunteer work at a non-profit that helps communities deal with environmental justice issues. It's different from what I thought I'd be doing, but it's meaningful. Your mum told me you were doing well, I said. I'm proud of you. Sophie's expression became more serious. I wanted to apologize, she said, for what I said during that counseling session, about how you could have stopped Dad. I was angry and scared and I blamed you, but I know now that wasn't fair. You were protecting yourself and our family as best you could. You were scared, I said. You had a right to be angry. I don't hold it against you. I'm sorry anyway, she said. I'm sorry for a lot of things. So am I told her. But I think we're both moving forward now. She smiled, and I could see relief wash over her face. 2 years after Marcus was arrested, Jennifer got remarried. It was a small wedding, just close family and a few friends. I walked her down the aisle, and I saw the relief in her eyes. She had survived the worst. She had taken something that should have destroyed her, and she had transformed it into a new beginning. At the reception, she pulled me aside. I wanted to tell you, she said, that I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what you went through. I was so focused on my own pain that I couldn't see yours. But I see it now, and I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that you had the strength to fight back. I'm grateful for you too, I said, for being willing to understand eventually. The community center project was completed on a cold Tuesday in November. The opening ceremony was attended by the mayor, members of the city council, and hundreds of people from the neighborhood. They had named it the Chen Community Center, which surprised me. I had only been one of many people who worked on it. When the mayor announced the name, she said something that I wasn't expecting. She talked about integrity in public service. She talked about the importance of people who are willing to stand up against corruption, even when it costs them personally. She talked about rebuilding trust in institutions, and she specifically acknowledged my role in helping expose the fraud that had been happening in the development approval process. I was embarrassed. I was also overwhelmed. But standing there, looking at that building that would serve thousands of people over the coming years, I understood something fundamental. My pain hadn't been wasted. My fear hadn't been meaningless. Everything I had suffered had led to something concrete, something real, something that would help people. That night I went home and I looked at a photo of David that I kept on my nightstand. It was from about 6 months before he died. He was smiling, really smiling, the way he did when he was completely happy. I did it, I told him. I survived it, and I made it mean something. 3 months later, I received notification that Marcus's appeal had been denied. He would serve his full 7-year sentence. Sophie had completed her probation, and her record had been sealed. She could move forward as if it had never happened. Jennifer had her new life, and I had my work. But more than that, I had learned something about myself. I had learned that I was stronger than my fear. I had learned that integrity, once you truly commit to it, is something that can sustain you even in the darkest moments. I had learned that the people we love can betray us, but that doesn't mean we stop believing in the possibility of trust and connection. On the anniversary of the day I wore the wire to Marcus's office, I sat in my apartment and I reflected on everything that had happened. The fear, the shame, the anger, the fighting, the small victories, the reconciliation with my family, and I realized that I was finally at peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because there were no more consequences to face or lessons to learn, but because I had chosen to do what was right, and I had lived with the consequences of that choice. I had survived. That evening, I called Jennifer, and we talked for an hour. We laughed about things we hadn't laughed about in years. We made plans for a family dinner. And when we hung up, I felt lighter than I had felt in a very long time. The truth is, my life would never be the same after that period of extortion and fear. But it also became something better. It became purposeful, It became meaningful. It became a life where I could look at myself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back, and that, in the end, is everything that matters.